And so welcome for all those who are live. Um, I'm going to share a little bit of this agenda that you see on the screen, the background on the LGMA. Every month, we're so happy to welcome new folks to this call. And so we do like to give some background in history and position the moment that we're in that brings us to this road to COP29. And then we've got, as a constituency, a, a statement, a set of asks and expectations that we're taking into this COP. And so I'll turn after my portion to Ariel Dekovic in our global team, our global director of communications, who can walk us through that guiding vision that the LGMA is taking into COP. We'll also mention that usually in these calls, we do get to cover the biodiversity proceedings. This is a year of a biodiversity COP. Given that Climate Week in New York is upon us, we'll instead dedicate our time to that one, but expect us to really highlight the biodiversity COP in the next month. All right, Kata, thank you. Next slide, we can move ahead. I'll give a little overview to our constituency. Again, for those joining the first time, welcome. This slide and the next few minutes are for you. Thanks for hanging in there if you've heard this a million times, for those who are really with us along the way all the time. The LGMA stands for Local Governments and Municipal Authorities. It's in UN terms a major group constituency to the negotiations on the Rio Conventions. So this is not only climate, but also biodiversity and desertification. This is one of the busiest years for our constituency because all three COPs are happening, as well as several other key events, and they're all right here in the last 4 months of the year. So we'll go through a little bit of those, and just want to say, like, we're showing up in solidarity in this busiest time. I know you're all feeling it the way I am. In simple terms, the LGMA is the voice of cities, states, and regions in the COP process and the year-long calendar of advocacy that happens between these COPs. We've had this role since 1995, one of the oldest constituency groups to contribute in the UNFCCC, the UN's climate body space in particular. We have four main avenues of action. You see them here on the screen, influencing the negotiations through our pavilions at the COPs, side events, our written submissions. Many of you tuning in have been, part of these for years now. We also contribute to the action agenda. This is point number 2, particularly with the high-level champions role that was formed in the Paris Agreement era. Number 3, we collaborate with each of the COP presidencies, which you all know. They come in and they host the COP, the presidency, the countries, and they bring their own priorities forward in that. And we make sure that the voice of local communities are not left out of those priorities. At the end of the day, the negotiation decisions are adopted by nations, of course, by the parties. So we do maintain contact in a, party by party, nation by nation collaboration all year long as well. And we really seek complementarity with these many work streams that are going on. Next slide. I think we'll just tell you your ways to stay involved throughout the whole year. You're tuning into this webinar. It happens every month. These are the dates for the upcoming webinars. Let me check real fast for October. We're working on the 16th. So that September date, we've moved it up. October will be on the 16th. If you're registered here, you're probably registered for them all. I'll also invite you to go get the monthly bulletin, which is the newsletter version of this webinar. You can subscribe at cities-and-regions.org, and then you'll never miss a beat. Next slide, please. Great. Here's the history lesson. In short, this is a journey that we are on together, and it's one we've been on for a while. This journey has accelerated quite quickly in the past decade or so. When you take a step back and you look at this full history since the early 1990s. As Eunice said on the morning edition of this call, we faced a dark era during the Kyoto Protocol years for our constituency because the negotiations at that time were really focused um, on the parties and specifically global north or OECD Annex 1 countries, and not really room, they were not super inclusive, and including not for the constituency voices. That dark era lifted, though, more or less around the early 2000s in Bali, in Copenhagen, especially in Marrakesh and later. So you all maybe are familiar with the Marrakesh Partnership that really explicitly gave a home to non-state actors to contribute in the UNFCCC processes in a more sanctioned kind of way. A few years later, during the pandemic years, I have to mention the COP26 Glasgow COP because that was the moment when our dreams of multi-level partnership, quote unquote, as a phrase, materialized in about a dozen instances in the Glasgow Climate Pact, that negotiation document that came out of the COP. This other phrase you'll hear, collaboration across levels of government, also meaning multi-level partnership, that made it into the preamble of the Paris Agreement. I remember really distinctly sitting on a bus. We're in Glasgow, so double decker on the top level bus with Ariel, and it was raining outside, and we were like talking about if this decision text really would make a difference, if we would see things for our constituency unfold in a different way. Now that collaboration across levels of government was, called out. It could have been the weather, but we were like a little bit pessimistic, I remember. But I'm happy to say now that we've definitely seen momentum for the constituency since that time, especially the very next year. In Sharm el Sheikh, that was COP27. In Egypt, the Surge Initiative was arguably one of the strongest of the presidency initiatives to come out of that COP. Surge stands for Sustainable Urban Resilience for the Next Generation. It says right there in the name that urban issues, city issues, were the focus, and that initiative has some life even to this day. Next slide, please. I will take us up to this more present moment and cover last year in Dubai. So COP28, we achieved some remarkable inputs on the decision, specifically paragraph 161 in the decision text of last year's COP, that urged parties to recognize multi-level action in the next round of NDCs. This was complemented by the presidency initiative known as CHAMP, which was endorsed by 72 countries who are agreeing to work closely with their local and regional governments as they're drafting their NDCs, which will, of course, be presented on or before next year's COP in Belém. Next slide, please. And I think, yeah, I'm going to share I'll breeze through this, but a real quick overview of some major outcomes from Dubai, particularly for our own constituency. And starting with this first one is ambition. We saw a first-time reference to a transition away from fossil fuels, a ramping up of renewables and electrification. I think we lost our slides in the screen share, but I'll keep going here as best I remember. Loss and damage, of course, was in focus, and including that due to LGMA advocacy that local communities should have an ability of sorts to directly access any loss and damage finance. For those of you who did not get to be with us, I want to recognize and thank the UN Habitat for their partnership on the multi-level action and urbanization pavilion. Um, that partnership brought the pavilion to life. It was our home in the blue zone, and played a real key role in connecting all the dots, as Eunice put it this morning. I can also share just news just in that we are confirmed. UN Habitat and the LGMA will partner on another pavilion for this upcoming COP. Ariel, I forgot if it's the larger or smaller. I think Eunice said it was 100 square meters to
It
me
is
this
the
morning.
100, yeah, it is 100 square meters.
Okay, so that's good. That's good news for all of us. Next slide, please. We'll just keep going ahead. Looking at the who's who in the road to COP29. These COPs are a cyclical process. So we've got some circles on the screen. Every year, the COPs have a new presidency. Usually, the countries who host a COP hand over their mandate to the next presidency somewhere near mid-year. The June Bonn intercessional is a good time for that, and so that's what you see happening this year, where the COP28 and COP29 presidencies are coordinating at that time period. Our LGMA leadership is strong again with COP29 presidency. We've enjoyed the collaboration with the Azerbaijan government, and particularly that two LGMA leaders have been installed on the advisory board for the COP. So this is Mayor Maimouna Sharif and Mayor Joseph Belamonte, both bringing your and our positions forward in that space. You can see that COP29 presidency got busy right away, um, uh, uh, assigning a high-level champion role, a youth climate champion, initiative co-leads, and more. So we can go to the next slide, and I'll highlight here um, the calendar of events throughout the year. I'll go through this quickly. I think a lot of us have been involved. But there are kind of these three work streams that we've come to see happen each year, starting with this yellow block at the top that you can think of as the global agenda, a little bit tangential to the UN stuff. And so global includes the G7, the G20, EU activities. We're in a big election year generally, where I'm at in the US and many other places. All of this can either strengthen and be advantageous to the LGMA's work in climate. It also can detract. And that really, changes year to year, but we all follow along there. In the middle there in the blue, this is the UNFCCC's official mandate. And the LGMA is always quite active in this work stream. We follow the procedures, the UN practices super closely. Of course, every year there's variances in the UN agenda. What I mean by that, for example, is I alluded to earlier that there's 3 COPs happening this year in all the Rio conventions, plus the UN Summit of the Future this month, the World Urban Forum next month in October. All of this like really, cram packed between now and November, basically. Finally, in green at the bottom, let's just call out that the LGMA has our own events and agenda. We have climate weeks in New York and London, even in Berlin this year. Our annual Daring Cities Forum, very strong, and serves as our kind of ongoing platform for LGMA. Engagement in the Urban 7 and Urban 20, which are engagement groups to the G7 and G20, and so much more. Next slide, please. Busy 100 days to go, which will just give you a little bit of a breakdown of what's happening here. everything from these forums I mentioned to the IPCC nominations, climate weeks, and more. A lot to break down. I'm not going to go into detail, but you've got this timeline to look forward to. But let's move to the next slide so I can really highlight this work on CHAMP. So among our initiatives for this year, CHAMP is among the largest or the biggest of focus areas for us. It's a commitment by the parties to the UNFCCC, 72 endorser nations that have agreed to work closely with local and regional governments in their NDC development. So at the end of the day, this means ministries of climate in these countries, ministries of urbanization, um, our what committed to upholding the ideals of this agreement. LGMA supports this work. So we hosted a roundtable of early endorsers in June in Bonn. Just this month, there was an important webinar that our friends at Global Covenant of Mayors and others brought forward. All of this activity is tracked on our website, citiesandregions.org. Yeah, Champ in focus. Next slide, I think, is the call to action for us from here. All focused on Champ again. I mentioned this, like, from the top down, it's nations, right? The endorser countries have their work to do. LGMA really working in a sort of bottom up supportive approach to the endorser countries. That mayor, our leader, Mayor Derner of Bonn, there on the screen, who led a call for support for Champ. That was quite effective, so much so that some of the regional associations or local government associations in individual endorser countries got behind Champ. So this is in Germany, in Brazil, in the United States, where I'm at. The associations of mayors coming together and releasing resolutions or similar in support of CHAMP. Thank you to Mayor Barbara Buffalo here in the United States. I worked with Mayor Buffalo for the resolution in the US that was passed by the US Conference of Mayors. Really, really exciting to see this kind of support happen so quickly. Great. So next slide, please. This slide will be new to most of us here. It's a web of workflow, I think you could say, for the LGMA in the negotiation space and in like a new way of working. So while this web is a work in process, it gives us a vision for how we can proceed in this kind of champ era. So what's happening here on the screen is a recognition that we need to engage our local communities in a new way. There's this if there's this mandate now, right, that local governments have an explicit role in NDC development, that that calls for new mechanisms, and you can imagine the complexity, right, of getting dozens or hundreds of cities and regions input to meaningfully inform what goes into an NDC. And so there's a few different actors that are needed to be involved in that kind of new mechanism and workflow. You see local communities here at the bottom, but definitely among the most meaningful. And then intermediaries, like U.S. Conference of Mayors, like Association of Mayors in Brazil, etc. Many of our countries have these associations serving as that intermediary role between local communities and both the LGMA and national governments. So we vision this collection, right, of gathering local community input and voices through a town hall COP. This is not the first time we've mentioned this town hall COP idea, but in short, any city, any town, county, regional government in the world could host a local COP, a mini COP. I've heard resonate a bit in their own backyard annually or semi-annually. And that's the moment to gather community input that then is fed or transferred to a national government in time to meaningfully incorporate that into a next round of NDCs. Um, so I will just say that this October is a good time for us to model these town hall COPs. Even this year, coinciding with Baku. We all know Baku is like scaled back a little bit in terms of attendance. It's a time for local governments to take more ownership, perhaps over the COP process, bring it home and model or pilot a town hall COP in your own community. So the LGMA, ICLE, many of our partners have the resources to help any city host your own town hall COP and then work with national governments to bring those insights forward into the NDCs ahead of next year. All right. Hopefully that's clear. And then we can move forward to the next slide here. Um, I will just say we've got this process in place. It's building out of the global stocktake. We were successful to have several dozen communities host local stock takes. That was a very backward and not a bad way. It was a stock taking process, but it was meant to see what happened in the years in the past. A key difference in a town hall COP is it's meant to look at forward. Where does the next NDC, you know, cycle need to be ramping up, accelerating? And we've got a whole toolkit that we've put together to help a city both bring what's happening local to the national scale and then the reverse. Like decisions are made at COPs. How do we bring that back home to inform our work in communities? So that more we would love to share on that coming up. So next slide, please. I'll just touch a bit on the mitigation work program because there's another special opportunity here. This is the first time that the mitigation work program is focusing on urban systems. So in the past, naturally, the program had a focus on energy. In June this year, there was a focus on buildings. So now you see October 5th is highlighted here. If you can read that small text, October 4th and 5th, there's a shift for the program to focus on urban systems. So these events in October will happen in Sharm el Sheikh. The LGMA has nominated 2 seats to be participating in this event. I believe Eunice is one of the seats, and then we'll take those outcomes as well to Baku from there. Last couple slides for me coming up. I think the next one is going to be focused on our agenda at New York City Climate Week. So as best as I can, I'm laying the groundwork to welcome you all here to New York City. I liked how Eunice phrased it. The week after next, the heart of climate advocacy will be beating in New York. You could think of the week roughly broken into 2 parts. The first half, starting on the 19th, so really kind of a week and a half is the engagement. So from the 19th through the 22nd, oriented around the summit of the future. And then the remainder of the week from the 23rd through the 26th or so on climate week. Summit of the future events. Thank you to UCLG colleagues for your coordination around that. Convening the World Assembly of Local and Regional Governments on the 19th, and then the action days of the summit through the weekend. there. The rest of the week, Climate Week, there's thousands of events at Climate Week. If you've been here, you know how overwhelming it can be. This is just a sampling of some of the key ones to call out while everyone's with us. On the 23rd, some COP-oriented events, a champ breakfast we'll be engaged in, also a COP29 presidency side event, a COP28 and 29 high-level dialogue in the Resilience Hub is happening. Thank you to our partners at Bloomberg Philanthropies, C40, GCOM, and others who are bringing a a number of champ-focused events to life at the Plaza in those days. So these are real core events for local governments to be at. And then on the 25th, that's the Wednesday, I personally will be very engaged with America's All In, the US State Department, in a full day of activity that has both a national US and international flair on how local governments can be engaged in CHAMP, informing the next cycle of NDCs. Got Japan and Brazil involved in this event too. So yeah, really, formative, foundational things are going to be happening to lay our groundwork for COP. So that's great. Last slide from me, I think, is coming up about a couple COP29 presidency initiatives that are worthwhile to call out. They also relate to these events on the 23rd of September that you just saw on the slide before. So the COP29 presidency has made a few innovations for this year. They've got around 10 or more initiatives already defined, one of them on sustainable and healthy cities. Not so much a process or program this year, but a declaration and an important call for continuity between the between these city-focused events at the COPs. So super important because we've already mentioned a few. There's Sturge, there's then Champ. So a call to bring synergy between these processes and city-focused finance as we make our road to Berlin. Very, very important kind of declaration to be getting behind. The other one I want to call out here is this COP29 truce deal. So in the spirit of recognition that climate action, resolving the climate emergency is so much about peace across the world. The Azerbaijan government is asking for all arms to be laid down during the COP period as a global truce so that the world can focus attention on peace and on climate action. The text is very straightforward in that way. There's nothing the LGMA would not want to support in that kind of truce deal. So we anticipate on the 23rd of September to release some sort of endorser statement from the LGMA on this COP29 truce. So those are some things to look forward to in the months coming up. I believe I will turn it over to you, Ariel, from here for a presentation on from your side on some of our key positions heading into the coming months. Thank you.
Great, great. Eloise, I see you have your hand raised, and I know you did put a question into the chat box. So regarding the newest text for the pledge, I think it is. I'm not sure that that Kale and I have it at the moment, but we can definitely follow up with Eunice and get that sent out to the LGMA after this. So thank you for that question. If you have an additional point you'd like to make, then feel free to, let me see if I can
Yeah, I just
Rebecca, maybe.
allowed her to
Okay,
talk.
great. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, Eloise, if you want to be able to come off mute, you can.
Hi everyone. I hope you can hear me. No,
Yeah.
I thank you so much, Kiara and Ariel. I just wanted to go back to that slide when you were looking at, our contribution as the LGMA community to the NDCs, and I think that's really helpful as we're kind of trying to understand better how we fit in and who is kind of coordinating what. I just wanted to maybe stress one thing because we've been obviously very involved on our end on the global goal adaptation and the UEA resilience framework, and maybe just not to just only focus on NDCs because there is now an obligation or at least a request for national governments and parties by 2030 to have national adaptation plans. So maybe my request would be that we also consider this kind of mechanism for also inputting into the NAPs, as they will also be quite relevant when we look at progress on adaptation. So it's just if we could maybe extend to a little bit just beyond the NDCs and to the NAPs
Hmm.
within this thinking.
Great. Thank you for that feedback. Um, Definitely can take that into account. And also additional global goals, I think they're probably are relevant as well. So great, thanks for that. And Eloise, and I would actually open this up to several different co-authors of the position paper that I'm going to talk about in a moment. If any of you want to come in after I have a couple of comments here, I would definitely welcome your participation as co-authors. So I know Eva, Banos, uh, sorry, Ula, yeah, Ula Kasperek and Pablo Mariani are all on the line. So after I just give a little bit of process, you would be welcome to come in with your perspective. So yes, we've been talking for a while now about the joint messages. We've had some great interventions. We presented at the ICLEI World Congress the joint messages in a session, and they've been going through some revisions in the past weeks as we prepare for the launch after the Summit of the Futures, or Summit of the Future, rather. So I think we can go to the next slide. I'll just go through the structure here and then a little bit more on the process of the next few weeks. But basically, the joint position, if you were with us through COP28, you know that we had a joint position going into COP28 as well. It was wonderfully articulated and just gave the constituency, I think, so much of an alignment to move forward that, we had so many delegates who are a part of COP28 that it really empowered them to speak with one voice for the constituency. So we have taken our lessons learned from that experience and the success of that experience, and have now developed a document series that is really aimed at different audiences, because we do have very different audiences who engage with the LGMA, and they have different kind of understandings and needs when it comes to understanding what we are actually asking of them. So the first document is a position paper. It is just a couple of pages long, very, very punchy, let's say, with three clear asks and includes some broad how-to recommendations. So it doesn't get into deep specifics, but there's enough there that anyone from members of the LGMA to elected officials and decision makers, especially those who are going to end up intervening and have the opportunity to intervene at COP, ministers, negotiators, media, who maybe aren't as kind of well versed in the space of the UN, or kind of more technical language, this document is really aimed at them. And so it aligns very much with the following three other documents, which are really technical level guidance for the parties on how they would operationalize the asks from document one. So each of the guidance documents on multi-level governance, on climate finance and on integrated outcomes all have very specific language about what would actually be in the COP outcomes and what success would look like. So I think we can go into COP feeling very confident that what we are looking to accomplish is clear to everyone and that we have kind of our marching orders going forward. And of course, this whole process is already starting, and that's primarily why we are trying to advance the final version for this now. You can go to the next slide. So here we see the high level positions. And so these should not be new to anyone because Eunice has been talking about these, maybe with slightly different wording, but yeah, the sort of main things are looking at the NDCs and really focusing in on that in the first ask, the second about financing everything that we're looking to do, and then finally a kind of integrated or synergized approach to the triple planetary crisis. So those are the high level asks. I'm going to put the link after I'm done speaking, as I can't do two things at once, into the chat. Everyone is welcome to have a look at the position. We are keeping it open for comments until basically the end of the day tomorrow. If you've been working on this, then you know you are welcome to make comments throughout the weekend. But on Monday, we're really looking to consolidate the document as there has been a tremendous amount of work that's gone into this document and wonderful contributions from across the constituency. So maybe we can now go back 3 slides to that process slide. Yep, this one. So what we're looking at in kind of the immediate term, as I said, comments until the end of the weekend really here so that we can finalize on the 16th. We do want to go into the Summit of the Future with a finalized draft. And at the end of the Summit of the Future, we're going to launch the final document for endorsement. So that means that all of the networks, everyone involved in LGMA will be invited to submit their organizational names and logos if you have it for endorsement, and that will it'll just be a form, so very easy to do, and then we will start to update the document to have all of the endorsers on it. So other parts of the we'll be sharing the high-level statements in our bulletin that's going out on the 18th. So we have a special version of the LGMA bulletin that's going to go out before the Summit of the Future and before Climate Week NYC. And so if you receive the call for content for that, please do submit your items that are relevant to these events that are happening in New York. And of course, anyone who is a part of the LGMA is welcome to submit content for that. Then we will, at the outset, at the end of the month, officially we'll put out the full version and the endorsement link in the September bulletin that's going to go at the very end of the month, but most likely through kind of other channels we'll also make the finalized version of the position available. Then the next portion is the endorsements, and then we'll have our traditional LGMA press conference opening COP on the 11th, and announce the full list of endorsers there. So that is the process we have gotten to. Again, many, many thanks to all of our wonderful contributors. And for those of you who are on the line right now, I would just ask if any of you are interested in coming and sharing just with us your perspective on the joint position. Otherwise, I can talk a little bit about a specific feedback request that I have from the group. So I'll just look here and see if anyone is raising their hand. Eloise, is yours an old hand?
Yeah, no, actually, it's just to add to what you were saying very quickly, but I think essentially what's interesting about the text for the negotiator, which is the second to fourth section, is it's really that it's useful to any of your regions, cities engaging with their parties on strands of the negotiations, because each element corresponds to a strand of the negotiation with pre-selected text that they can almost copy paste if they wanted to include cities and subnational governments within the outcome text of the COP. So it's really like it's more of a almost like a working document that can then be sent to negotiators, and cities and subnational governments can take the ownership of like contacting their parties if they think that this is relevant to them. So it's just to say that it's beyond just a call to action. It's really a working document that can be used to influence negotiations. So I think it's good that we can stress that, and that would be the LGMA guidance for the parties elements.
Great, Eloise. Yes, fantastic point. That is yeah, just an action-oriented part of the set of documents. Just really trying to strip out all of the pain points that negotiators might have in trying to understand what our asks are and really getting it down to the text level recommendations. So great point. And yeah, for those of you who weren't involved in COP28, we really did see that level of advocacy happening where individual representatives from local and regional governments were directly engaging with their nation's parties to advance these asks. So good point on that. And then kind of complementary to what Eloise pointed out, my question is really about the position, the document number 1, whether or not you feel like that document resonates with elected officials that you might be working with. Because I think one of the kind of disconnects that we saw at the end of last year, it wasn't even a disconnect, but I think it was afterwards feedback that we got was this sort of question of, how can we more motivate local and regional leaders to understand what the LGMA is looking for, to be that voice for the LGMA as well. And so my question is kind of whether or not if you can read the document with that in mind, if you are working more directly with elected officials, whether or not that document kind of solves that problem a little bit. So those are the main goals of these documents. So again, invitation to have a look at this in the next few days, and otherwise we will send it out for really your use. And then I think also, beyond kind of getting it into the hands of our target audiences, we do want to use this as kind of a jumping off point for other communications channels and strategies that we have, including reaching out to media and further work that we'll be doing at COP to support the communications around the LGMA. So I think I don't see any questions or and no raised hands on this. So Kale, I think I might turn it back over to you if you're ready.
I am ready. Thank you, Ariel. Well, that's nice. In the chat, a very, very good webinar. We really appreciate that. Thank you. I hope it was useful. Let's look for hands or folks who have some questions. I'm not seeing any other reactions. So we can maybe close a little bit earlier today. Great. Ariel has shared the position paper, so that's one point of action. Reach out to me, of course, or Eunice if you're coming to Climate Week. We'll love to see you. And otherwise, we'll see you on this call in about a month from now.
Thanks, everyone. Have a great month.
Thank you all. Bye.